Look at this little bugger trying to look innocuous. I know what he's doing. That's a scout. That's exactly what that is. Yeah. Looking over here, measuring things up, ready to alert his pals in the bushes that it's time to come out in force. So, yeah, keep it up, little guy. I got my eyes on you. Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars and Auto House of Naples on a miserable, pissy, humid Florida November morning. I mean, this is just unacceptable. 2 days ago, I was giggling. It was lovely. It was crisp. There was a nice chill in the air. I even had a light jacket on. And, you know, yesterday, yeah, it wasn't quite as good, but it was okay. And then today, oh, God, you got to be kidding me. It sucks. I mean, there's this misty light rain in the air. I've wiped this car down like 3 times now, and I've just given up because it comes back 10 seconds later. So I'm just going to persevere through it. But, you know, the glasses are fogged up again, and everything's absolute shit. So we'll see what happens. But good Lord, could we not get a little freaking proper weather for once? At least that lasts a few days before slamming us with some humid, moist, nasty horse shit like we have right now. There was a rabbit earlier. I think he was a scout. He didn't come at me or anything. He stayed over there and looked like he was cleaning himself or something. But I suspect he, you know, was just sort of trying to look innocent and communicating strategy to his friends in the bushes. So they could come out at any point. They could attack. And who knows if this video will ever make it up onto YouTube. But we'll give it a shot anyway. So the hell with it. Let's just move forward. What I have today is a 1986 Ford Thunderbird. Now, the Thunderbird... Okay, well, look, this is a 9th generation Thunderbird, if that tells you anything, and it's really old. So, you know, when Thunderbird came out, and without question, it's one of the iconic and seminal, that's a touchy word, seminal cars in American history. It came out in 1955. Despite being incredibly impractical, it was a raging success. People went nuts for it. You know, it was a 2-seat convertible, very, very stylish. Maybe the first person in luxury coupe of the modern era. Who knows? That's up for argument and debate. But what isn't is that it was very, very successful. If you remember, Corvette came out, you know, a year earlier, and it was the pride of Chevrolet, or was going to be. And Thunderbird just blew it out of the water. I mean, they sold like 7 Thunderbirds for every single Corvette, and part of that success is what has kept the price down on those things today. You know, a lot of them survived. So when you've got a pretty good supply, you don't have to pay a lot for a car because there's one more coming around. Right? You know, there's that really scary bird somewhere. There's one more coming around right after it. And, you know, well, maybe that's become less and less true. The prices of them have started going up. But for quite a long time, and even to some extent today, those original Thunderbirds are a pretty good bargain in the car world. Across the first 10 generations, 10, the Thunderbird was made continuously since 55 all the way through 97, more often than not being a pretty successful car for Ford. It got a hiatus for a few years, and then it came back as one of those retro modern things that like the Mini Cooper started, or the Beetle, take your pick, doesn't matter, same basic car. And they came back as a 2-seat roadster, not dissimilar to the 55 model, including with the styling. And out of the gate, that thing was very successful. People started buying it up in droves, but very quickly they stopped for whatever reason. And the cars started piling up on the Ford dealer lots, and lots of incentives to get rid of them. Production went down for the next 3 model years, and then in 05 it just vanished altogether. Went the way of the Eldorado or the Dodo Bird. It's, you know, kind of sad to see these storied American car names die. But this car followed one of the less successful T-Birds, it has to be said. The 80 through 82, I guess that's what, 3 model years. The only time I ever actually remember seeing one in the movies was in, I want to say it was Death Wish 2. Could have been 3, but, they all blend into each other. But with, little Charles Bronson acting all tough. And I just thought as an accountant, it seemed like he was an accountant. What was he, an architect or something? But he was obviously a well-to-do guy. And while the Thunderbird was kind of a stylish mark, at the time, that 80 through 82 Thunderbird was not beautiful. In fact, according to legend, in 1980, Ford President Donald Peterson asked his Vice President of Design, Jack Taillights, of the 1980 Thunderbird, is this what you would want in your driveway? And, Mr. Taillights, jeez. Remember to put that on silent. Anyway, Mr. Taillights responded that no, it is not exactly what he would want to have, and as a result, very quickly they started redesigning the Thunderbird, and that 80 through 82 didn't last very long before this one came out in 1983. And you have to remember that this was a time when Ford was starting to question what they were doing and to change things up. Ford was, of course, a big force in global automotive production and very big in Europe. Of course, the GM had Opel and other stuff too, but it just seemed like Ford was hitting it harder globally. And they decided that they wanted to start modernizing and aerodynamicizing their cars. You have to remember that, you remember the Mercure, that came out after this car did, I think in 85, but they actually took a couple of European Fords and brought them over here and released them as US models under the brand name Mercure. It did not do well. But frankly, I really liked them. There was this coupe called the XR4 Ti, which I lust after even today, because it just had this crazy European rally car look. And even with the stupid name, it was a pretty neat piece, but that wasn't meant to be. There was also SVO, their special vehicle operations. They came out with a Mustang that was essentially designed to compete with BMW or, small Mercedes, that sort of sporty European cars. And it had a 4-cylinder turbo, handshaker, European-looking headlamps, and, a very sleek design. And that was just the direction Ford was going in. In fact, this was probably the era that killed the traditional American car, when American companies gave up the ghost, got rid of the opera windows and, big wire wheel hubcaps, and started trying to make everything look like a BMW or Mercedes. And that is the direction they went with Thunderbird. The inspiration, somewhat for this car, and much more so for the generation that came after this, was the BMW 6 Series, the 635. I think that was probably made most famous by Moonlighting. It was driving around in that show. But this car sort of hearkened to it. But the next generation, the one that came out in 89, it was almost like a blatant copy. So Ford was basically, and they were Europeanizing their stuff. And if you remember the Sable, the Mercury Sable and the Ford Taurus came out in 86, and basically caught GM off guard, wooed the public that wanted European cars for whatever. You remember the Chevy Eurosport? That's the level to which Americans wanted European stuff. It was very, oh God, it was an awful time. Let's hope they never do that with politics. Maybe they already have. But anyway, so 86 came out the Sable and the Taurus, and it just absolutely sold like hotcakes and took GM for a ride. So yeah, it was a pretty cool deal, but it was basically, to me, the death of the American car, and I think that's a shame. Everything since then just has not really been in the traditional sense of what I think of, big full frame, rear wheel drive, ornate, well styled. Yeah, all that's gone in favor of this sort of, conservative styled, aerodynamic, Euro weenie stuff that I just don't think is as cool, even if it probably is better in many ways. 86 was an interesting year, and I was 15 at the time, so I was pretty well into it. I mean, all the pop culture shit I remember really, really well, as, of course, the news events, and probably the biggest one of the year. It depends where you were. If you were in Europe, I guess it was Chernobyl. That was where that Ukrainian nuclear reactor exploded, causing great embarrassment to the Soviets, a global panic, especially in places that were close to, Central Europe, and the ongoing, even to this day, there's repercussions from Chernobyl that have caused a tremendous amount of angst for a lot of people. I don't think the death toll was actually that bad. Look at that. Look at all those little flying bastards congregating on that tree, only about 100 feet. Get out of here. That was close. So anyway, Chernobyl was a pretty big deal. In the United States, probably the Space Shuttle Challenger exploding was the biggest news, if you remember that. And I do. It happened while I was at school. I didn't watch the launch. Some kid came running out saying, the Space Shuttle exploded. And like any dumb shit kid, he was happy. Oh my God, bad things. The way you used to root for hurricanes when you were a kid. So, but I remember where and when I was when that happened. I guess it was because of some frozen O-ring or something. You'd almost think they had BMW engineers working on it because it took off, exploded, and caused a bit of a national calamity. And for many years afterwards, I actually had a Challenger plate on my Firebird, which was a pretty cool license plate from Florida. Honestly, it was more about the plate than it was the accident. You got a Halley's Comet that came like for the second time in the century that flew around. Mike Tyson, despite his weird voice, became the youngest heavyweight champion. Gorbachev, he unveiled perestroika and glasnost, sort of a softening of the Soviet lifestyle and economy, trying to breathe a little life into the dying Soviet Union, which did not work at all. In the movies, you had Top Gun. There it is. You had Platoon, you had Crocodile Dundee. The nicotine patch was invented. Didn't help me out, but there it was. And music-wise, you had, like Prince, Madonna, Robert Palmer, and then the Bangles doing that really stupid friggin' Egyptian thing, which drives me nuts every time I hear it. And being a teenager then, I do remember a pretty good amount of the pop culture from that era, and it's just fun, which makes this car fun for me, and the whole, era fun for me. It was just, when I saw this thing sitting there, and it looked like such a time machine, I thought, man, I gotta do that. That is just right up my alley. I remember these cars so well from this vintage. But back to the car. So look, you can see the aero thing is in force. It's got this little grill, it's got all these rounded corners, it's got a rounded roof. They've minimized the amount of chrome on the car. That was a thing. This one still has a lot, but that got less and less as these models went on. And it just was a good-looking car. It had a drag coefficient like half of what the model that existed did, which actually made it pretty good for NASCAR. This car was heavily used in that racing series, maybe most famously in real life by Bill Elliott in that... I can't remember what the Budweiser car he drove. It doesn't. Motorcraft. I don't know. It doesn't matter. And then in the movies by Stroker Ace, Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson, and he had that chicken pit Thunderbird he drove around. And yeah, it's sad that I still remember specifics from that movie. But what the hell? It was my era. But the car was obviously meant to narrow the gap between Europe and America, to make American cars more in line with what Europeans were looking for. And for whatever reason, despite Reagan hanging around and, American flags flying and jets in the air, people wanted that. They wanted their cars to look more European. So, but it was based on the Fox body, that famous Mustang chassis. So also, by the way, was the Lincoln LSC of the same era, the Continental. Which I guess it is a cheap platform, there's no question, but it's very, very solid. And it's interesting to think that guys driving around in their Continentals were the same cats driving around, 5-liter LX Mustangs doing burnouts in parking lots. So it's just curious. It was based on that, and it had, pretty good handling as a result. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pause for a minute. I'm going to wipe the sweat off my brow, clean up my glasses, and then we're going to dive back into this car. So bear with me one moment. All right, so we're going to kind of barrel through this thing because I feel like there's more rain coming and I don't want to get caught up in it. So, maybe as a result we'll have an actual reasonably length video today, but it's hard to say. The design of this car had pretty mixed results internally with Ford. In fact, one upper level exec, looking at it in the mock-up, said it looked like a burnt tennis shoe. I can't say I see that, but yeah, maybe. But you could tell that it was sort of that a very a line in the sand between the past of what Americans had been making and the future of what they would go on to make, love it or hate it. And this Ford was right in the middle of it, and the design was as such. It still did have the 4 square lamps up front. In the restyle of this car in 1987, it got European lamps and everything got stretched out, and it all was made to look a little bit more like it was, running around Hamburg instead of Skokie. So a very interesting small grille, with egg crate looking thing with black in the center and chrome around, and of course a big redesigned Thunderbird logo on it. Angled bumper, integrated impact strip, looks nice. Very interesting looking alloy wheels. This is a pretty well equipped model, I have to say, and those alloys look nice to me. You see the 4 lug bolts, that's kind of a dead giveaway. It's the Fox body. I'm sure Ford guys have a name for these alloys, like manhole bowling balls or something, but I don't know what it is. I'm sure someone in the comment section will say, but I think it's a good looking wheel on the car. You do still have some chrome around the windshield despite their efforts to minimize the chrome. You've got chrome on the power antenna bezel there. You've got chrome around the side windows. This car had apparently a fairly rare side vent window option, which is fascinating to me because it harkens more to the 60s than even the 70s, the vent windows in this car. I kind of like them. I think they're cool, and I'd like to have them if I had one of these Thunderbirds. You got chrome door handles. The reason for this big giant keyhole is it was illuminated at the time, which maybe was more difficult than it is today with small LEDs. You've got Thunderbird logo on the rear pillar there. You've got a nicely rounded rear windshield back glass with more chrome around it. Kind of a neat swooping line that almost looks like a duckbill spoiler or duck lid spoiler, deck lid, whatever, running from that all the way through to the front of the car. And, I think it gives it a little bit of a panache. You've got wraparound taillights with good looking trim underneath them. The license plate is sunk into the center. Thunderbird script on the passenger side of the car, and the original, it's a North Carolina car, this thing, from one family, Woodcock, black. So that poor guy, he was either brutalized in high school or he was a hero. I guess it depends on him. But yeah, that's an interesting, I guess again, when you go on to form a car dealership, you probably have lots of confidence, so it probably worked out for him. But anyway, I think all in all, a pretty damn good looking car. And let's get inside the trunk. Still the 2-key system, which is great. So the square one runs the doors and the round one runs the trunk, and of course that's something that would go away in the pretty near future. There you see a pretty nicely covered spare tire. Is the original tire. The thing has 25,000 miles on it. It really is in the wrapper, this car. But anyway, there it is. Dalton even made a show of airing that tire up yesterday, so he was proud of that. There you see the original lug jack or lug wrench with the, I don't know what the bag's for, but it's there and it's attached. This is the front license plate that was never installed. These are the factory floor mats with the proper backing. So and a nicely finished trunk as well. And that was a move away from the 70s. I mean, if you saw that Buick we did the other day, it was all spatter paint and cheap carpet. They definitely, American makers, upped their trunk game a little bit to make them more finished, and everything in there looks nice and proper. Have a look under the hood. It's going to be hard because it still uses a prop rod type thing, and I've only got one hand, and this hood is heavy as hell. Oh God, bear with me. This is going to fall and kill somebody, and I know who that somebody is. All right, so here it is. This is a 2.8 liter Essex V6. This was the base engine in the base car. They didn't have too many options. It was fuel injected, I believe, throttle body. It went on to be multi-port a couple years later. You could also get a 302, which I suspect a lot of people did, that being a 4.9 liter with incorrect 5 liter badging. And in 86, that would have had multi-port fuel injection. Would have been a nice motor in here. I think this one's connected to the C3 3-speed, which is kind of a bulletproof automatic trans from Ford. But it seems a bit vintage for this car. I was surprised to see that. I definitely expected their more modern overdrive thing. This was probably one of the last years for it. You can see under the hood, it's a miracle. I mean, I don't know who owned and preserved this car, but they were insane, and I wouldn't want to spend 10 minutes with them. I would just like to show up, buy their car, and then get the hell out of there, because this is, normal people don't do this kind of thing. They just don't. You have to be a little bit strange to preserve a car for this many years in this condition. There was also, interestingly, what was called the Lima engine. That was a 2.3 liter four-cylinder turbo, and that showed up in a car called the Turbo Coupe from Ford, which was actually offered with a manual gearbox, which was kind of interesting. Not everybody opted for it, but you could get it, and that was basically the engine straight out of that SVO Mustang, the SVO being designed to compete with the Europeans and trying to be European, and a 2.3 turbo being kind of a Euro style engine. So the Turbo Coupes from the Thunderbirds, you could get that, and it was, they make a neat little side note today. I don't know how reliable or good they are, but they're kind of interesting. Anyway, there were a couple of special editions from this 83 to 86 vintage. There was a 30th anniversary that came out in 85. It was blue, and it was all loaded up and kind of interesting. And in 84 and I think 85, there was a Fila Thunderbird, which was white outside, had white leather inside, had the Fila badge on the fender. And for whatever strange reason, I lusted after that car. I couldn't even begin to tell you why. I mean, if someone gave it to me, I'd have it there. I would have satisfied my lust, and then I'd be wondering what the hell I was supposed to do. But, I don't know. To me, it's a little bit of a unicorn or something. I really want to get my hands on a Fila Thunderbird. So if you know where one is or one can be bought, shout it out in the comment section. Maybe I go track that thing down. But it has to be nice. I'm not going to buy a turd, for Christ's sake. But anyway, there it is. There's the engine in this thing, which is pretty epic. So I tell you, look, I'm going to get this down with two hands. I'm going to pause again and get my shit inside the trunk, and then we're going to go for a spin after looking over the interior. Bear with me one more moment. All right, well, we're doing this none too soon. I can already feel the specks of rain coming back again. So there you see in the entrance, it's got this Ford keypad key entry thing that they've had for years. They still have today. And it proves very successful with the people who like Fords. Other people look at it and say, God, that thing looks friggin' ridiculous. But yeah, whatever. I guess Ford guys enjoy that, so there it is. There is a nice prolific use of chrome around the car on a car that was, again, designed to not really have any, or certainly to keep it to a minimum. I mean, here is the time machine in this thing. I mean, I've got to say, it's just epic, man. I mean, that Buick I did the other day, I really thought that was the finest original car that I've seen in 20 years, and along comes this one, and yeah, I mean, it would be hard to decide which one was better preserved in its original state, and it's just incredible to me. But anyway, you see actually a fairly simple door panel, it has to be said. And the fit and finish of this car, I don't know if it's just the preservation, but it seems like it's actually pretty good, and better than I would have expected from a car of this era. It's all tight together, there's no big warping or peeling or fading, and I have to say, all in all, I'm pretty impressed. I'm going to have to go into 2x speed because I feel the rain coming down on my head now. And there are these rather cool vent windows. I didn't use one yet. Let's see if that opens up. would have to come this way. Yeah, look, I mean, that's like something from a VW bus. It just cracks me up to see that in there. That must have been hearkening back to the older customers at the time. Your Canadians in the back, yeah, they're going to be fairly chipper. You've got pretty good leg room under there, no problems at all. You've got, you know, soft cloth to sit in. You can kind of sit 3 across, although the guy in the center is going to be, you know, ass up a little bit. And then a long package shelf in the back. And then 86, that was the first year of that center brake light, which you can see on the rear package shelf. All of a sudden, every car had those things. You can't really see it through the reflection. And Advance Auto Parts, or whatever, Western Auto, whatever was around back then, made a fortune selling, you know, the little ones in the box that you could go retroactively install in your older cars to make them look new. I sold a shitload of those. I even fell victim to that. My sister had an 84 Saab 900 that I loved, and I have to admit that I went out, got one of those things, and installed it on the package shelf. Again, this one seems to have a very high option package. Here you see it as a power reclining driver's seat, which is something I really wasn't expecting, was power seats in this car. Yeah, and not just the, you know, recline, the rest of it as well. It has automatic headlights, automatic high beams, automatic dimming. Really impressive, I have to say. I was really quite taken with it, especially given that this is the base Thunderbird. There was an upmarket version called the Elan, which, you know, came with more standard stuff, although I guess you could order just about anything on any Thunderbird. But I didn't, you know, when I got in this and saw all the equipment it had, I was surprised to hear there was a higher trim level. Maybe you ended up with more velour on the seats or something, so who knows. But let's fire up this 6. Yeah, you know, it fires up pretty good, runs nice and smooth. I don't know if it has, what kind of horsepower it has. Probably something pathetic, like 130 or 140. But in driving it around, it really hasn't troubled me too much, and has actually had a, you know, pretty nice amount of pep. I mean, I'm obviously not setting any land speed records, but it doesn't feel like I'm lagging trying to get things going. Get a little AC going. It's actually really nice and cold in this car. Another thing that fascinated me, see, it's got this digital instrumentation. That was an option at the time, so you know, neat. You could go through different gauges here. So you've got your that's your temp gauge, there's your oil pressure gauge, there's your voltmeter, fuel level, and then back to temp. You know, neat stuff. And one of these Knight Rider style tacks over there. Over on this side, you've got obviously a pretty fancy trip computer. Then you could get into, I don't want to reset, distance to empty, distance, miles per hour, miles per, you know, all this stuff, which was kind of fun. And then there's a button that's called speed. I press it and nothing happens, and certainly not speed, so who the hell knows. This is incorrect this time. I'll have to set that later, but you got a digital clock there, you got vents, you got this nice looking brushed aluminum, which again is supposed to harken to the Euro thing. You've got kind of a fancy look at AM FM cassette deck. Steve Miller, he has his moments. This surprised me to see a manual AC control. I would have thought with this trim level you'd have gotten the digital. Kind of makes me wonder if the digital didn't screw up and they replaced it with that, but who knows. And then you've got a pretty, man, this thing is like got the spring from a 72 Cadillac hood on it. I mean, it pushes hard out. I can't believe it's still working. But obviously people still smoked in the 80s, because that's a pretty good size ashtray. These people, looks like maybe somebody lit a cigarette or two off there, but all in all, I don't think too much. This is a neat little center here for your power mirrors, your dual power seats, and your windows. This freaked me out, and in fact, when I first ran it, I thought this had to be screwed up, like they got the, so I went, you know, like this to run the window down. Nothing happened. I thought, oh, shit, I'm putting a window in it. Then look at it. Down is up, and up is down. And I thought that it was reversed, but the script backs it up. So to go down, you have to push the thing forward, which frankly seems quite strange to me. There in the mirror, you see the sensor for the high beam dimmer. You got a rear view mirror that looks pretty standard. You got a couple of 80s style cocaine mirrors, which is all very nice. Here in the glove box, you've got the original owner's manual and some other books for the radio and shit. I don't know, I might put my belt on and never be able to reach this. Down here, what do we got? This is the original entry code for the door and what probably passed for some kind of a protective plate back then. An aluminum thing with the VIN stamped in it. And then the Thunderbird brochure from '86 and a North Carolina plate that says Survivor, which it is. No question about that. I also grabbed this, which I robbed from one of the cars I bought, I don't know, a few months ago. It came with a bunch of cassettes. So let's see if well, what do we got in here that's worth listening to? ABBA, the single. We need something 80s. Movie hits, Chris Isaac, Too New, Pete Town. I don't know. This, this isn't exactly full of shit that I would like to listen to. We got Thomas Dolby. That seems pretty 80s. Let's see what we got going here. Let's see if this cassette deck will do it. Love it. I even believe that's one of these extended blinded me with science setups. So there it is. I'm going to leave Thomas Dolby in there, and we're going to go for a spin. Oh, and if I wanted to store those things, look at that. We got in console cassette storage. Alright, and there it is. You see, I see what? 12D. So I don't see a little button on the side. I don't see anything to tell me it's got overdrive. So I suspect we've got that C3 transmission in there, which, again, great transmission, but seems a little bit vintage for a car from 1986. And wait for this gate. I tell you what, I'll pause it. We'll get to the end of the road, and then I'll pick it up again. So away we go for a cruise. One thing that's interesting is the power steering in this car is very over-assisted. Really reminds me of a more vintage American car. I mean, if they were looking to get European steering feel, they really didn't pull that off too well. I find myself sort of over-steering the car. I can drive it with my pinky, truly, like I could a 73 Riviera. So Ford, they either got that right or wrong, depending on who their customer was. The brakes, the power, the 6 has enough pep to move it. I can't complain too much about it. It has a tilt wheel, it's got cruise control, it's got variable wipers, it's got all that crap that it's supposed to have. And here I am about to be jammed up in traffic. So what I'll do is another little interstate cruise at the end. And actually, it looks like I've got heavy rain up there, maybe. So the internet cruise might be in the rain. It's a shame. I don't think this car saw too many rainstorms. Got to get back to the shop so I can dry it off and get it inside. But there you go, 25,000 miles on the clock of this thing. Honestly, a pretty epic car. It really, really is. And man, does it take me back to a time in my life when I, frankly was paying attention. So it's just kind of interesting and a fun car, and I was very happy to have it. If you have an interest in this thing, you can... I'm not sure if it's going to be on the website or not. Again, I'm trying to tone down the American content there. So you could give them a call at 239-263-8500. And if it is going to be on the web, it'll be at autohousenaples.com. Thank you so much for having a look. Really appreciate it. And we will see you with the next one. Take care.